The terrifying phenomena of the black-eyed kids is, I'm sure, familiar to those of you who frequent the strange and mysterious dark corners of the internet with the stark warning to never let them in. But I'm here to tell you, you better keep your guard up, because keeping them out of your house isn't as easy as just slamming the door in their faces, as Bradley, a regular dad from Texas, finds out the hard way in this Monster Mash episode of Terrifying Encounters. It's November 2007, and Bradley, his wife, and his son Alex are living in Tyler, Texas. And they've been living in their new house for a few months now, and they just passed Alex's 4th birthday. Bradley gets up super early for work, so he goes to bed early. But Alex has been having trouble sleeping lately, so Bradley's wife has been going to bed with him to keep him company. As he does every day, Bradley wakes up at 4 a.m. and gets dressed for work. Then he goes through the kitchen and down the hall past Alex's bedroom, where his wife and Alex are sleeping, and keeps going to his office. He turns on his computer, checks his emails, and kills some time until it's time to leave for work at 4:30. Usually, he goes out the garage door, but that makes a lot of noise. So on this particular morning, he changes his mind and decides to go out the front door. It's dark and chilly out, so he doesn't waste any time getting into his 4-door desert sand-colored Saturn and starting the engine. Unfortunately, the transmission is messed up and the car doesn't go in reverse. So he keeps his left foot hanging out of the door and uses his foot to push the car back out of the driveway and into the street. Once the car hits the street, he keeps pushing until he has enough room, turns the wheel to the right, and as he starts moving forward, watches as his headlights sweep across his yard, the neighbor's yard, and onto their walkway. And just so you know, this map we're showing comes straight from Bradley himself. So he watches the headlights sweep across the yard, and in the headlights, he sees a little boy standing on his neighbor's walkway, dressed only in his underwear, sucking on a sippy cup. And Brad's first thought is, dang it, now I'm going to be late for work, because it's dark and it's cold outside, like 40 degrees, and he knows he has to go get this kid, call the police, and make sure he gets back to where he belongs. Bradley pulls the car back into the driveway, shuts it off, gets out, and starts walking towards the boy. And as he gets closer, he can see it's Alex. He quickly grabs Alex up, hurries back to his front door, fishes his keys out of his pocket, and unlocks the door. He rushes inside, yelling for his wife, "Honey, I just found Alex outside. I don't know how he got out or how long he's been out there," as he goes down the hallway toward Alex's room. He flings the door to his room open, and there is his wife, sound asleep. And next to her is Alex. In a fraction of a second, Bradley's brain is trying to process the thought, if Alex is sleeping, who am I holding? He looks at the boy he has in his arms, and the boy's eyes are solid black. The next thing Bradley knows, he's back in bed like he's just waking up, but he's already fully dressed for work except his shoes. He glances at the clock, 4:45, and he thinks, what the hell just happened in the last 15 minutes? He grabs his keys, throws his shoes on his feet, and runs through the kitchen again, and this time he pushes open the door to Alex's room. And there they are, Alex and his mom, just like they were a minute ago, sound asleep right next to each other. Bradley is now running late, so he rushes out the front door again, takes a quick look around for anything that looks out of place and shouldn't be there. But everything looks completely normal. He gets into the car, unfortunately not thinking to check if the car is still warm. He hurries off to work, getting there about 5 or 10 minutes late, tells the manager what happened. His manager just says, "Huh, that's a pretty weird dream." But Bradley knows it wasn't just a dream, because just a week later, behind the printer in his office, Bradley finds the black-eyed boy's sippy cup. Holy cow! Bradley didn't report anything bad happening by having the black-eyed kid in his house, but for me, living with the memory of that experience would be torture enough. But your home is not the only place where high strangeness can take place. As the following story will prove, your place of employment is totally fair game. This encounter was sent to us by a woman who was a prison guard in Ontario. She's been medically retired from her job at the penitentiary for a while now, so her non-disclosure is probably elapsed by now. Maybe. Or is it the inmates that she just can't talk about? Let's just call her Kay. The penitentiary Kay works at is about as old and creepy as they come. So, of course, Kay mainly works the midnight shift. The place is filled with violent inmates who, with the exception of a very few, all hate the guards. So, pleasant vibes all around. Now, every hour, the guards have to walk the halls or ranges, which are 2 tiers each of each wing, looking into each cell to make sure everything is normal. They work in pairs, with the first guard who does the walking and the second guard watching the first through both an open office window and on monitors from cameras pointing down the range. This particular hour, Kay's partner, who we will call Scott, is doing the walking. And the first floor is totally fine, but as he comes up the stairs to the second floor, he asks Kay, "Hey, can you do the second floor?" He just says he feels uncomfortable. And Scott's no rookie. He's been doing this for like 16 years. He does not scare easily. But Kay says, just do it quick. So Scott starts walking the hall as fast as he can, shining the flashlight into each cell to make sure everything's fine. He gets to the end and turns around to come back. Now, leaning on the metal railing that looks down onto the first floor is a mop in a bucket. As Scott passes it, the mop stands straight up, moves back and forth, goes in circles, and slams to the floor. Scott stops in his tracks, his eyes wide as saucers, but Kay thinks hers may have been even wider. She yells, "Run!" And Scott runs as fast as he can back to the office, where they both need a minute to collect themselves again. Scott doesn't do any more walks that night and tells the supervisor exactly why. The supervisor doesn't say a word, just nods his head. Now, that encounter may not seem all that scary to us listeners in YouTube land, but that's not the only encounter Kay has. That prison has another area with a hospital upstairs from the nurses' and doctors' offices. And again, every hour they have to do walks. Thankfully, the range is much shorter. In this area, they have to go down 2 different halls. The walk on one side is never an issue, totally fine. But the other side is a different story. Every time she walks this range, Kay can feel something like a presence walking right behind her. And remember, this is night, so no one else is supposed to be there. She can feel dread and anger coming from whatever this invisible entity is, as every hair on her body stands up. Kay begs Scott, "Please come with me." Scott says, "No way. I feel it too, so forget it." One particular night, another jail is bringing in an inmate, and Kay jumps at the chance to go downstairs and let them in before Scott has a chance to say boo. Kay takes the elevator downstairs. Now, when the elevator goes down and the doors open, whoever's inside has the perfect view of the monitors in the guard station right across the hall. And the monitors are, of course, pointing down every hallway. As the elevator doors open for Kay, she sees the bank of monitors, and on one of those monitors, she sees a dark shadow fly across the screen. Her first thought is that she must be causing some kind of reflection or something. So she starts waving her arms around while watching the monitor, trying to recreate what she just saw. But she can't. So she just ignores it and sits down at the desk in the guard station. About 5 minutes later, Kay hears a noise, almost like someone sliding a box across the floor, coming from one of the back halls. It's summer, so she thinks, well, someone must have left the windows open and somebody's doing something outside. So she gets up, checks the windows, and they're all closed. So she goes back to the desk, and a few minutes later, she hears it again. Kay eases back on her chair and looks over to where she thinks the sound is coming from, but there's nothing there. She sits back up and looks at the monitor as this large black mass floats across the screen. Kay's blood runs cold. She grabs the keys and sprints toward the stairway that goes upstairs because there's no way she is waiting around for the elevator. She gets back upstairs and back to her office, her whole body shaking with fear and adrenaline. Her office is attached to the nurse's office. So when the nurse hears Kay come crashing back to her office, the nurse comes in asking where the new inmate is. And Kay says, he's not here yet, but there's no way I'm going back down there. She tells the nurse about what just happened down there. And the nurse says, oh, that's just Ray. He's harmless. Kay is completely gobsmacked and on the verge of tears. You knew there was a ghost down there and you didn't tell me? Needless to say, Kay never goes back to the hospital area at night again. About a month later, Kay is sitting around with a bunch of other guards and actually gathers the fortitude, despite the almost certain mockfest she's about to receive, to tell everyone about her experience that night in the hospital area. And to her surprise, the mocking never comes. Everyone just sits there quiet when Kay's supervisor, who we'll call Nick, chimes in. I had a ghost or a demon or something follow me home. Well, that certainly gets everyone's attention. Nick goes on to say that it started out at home with things being moved, a cold spot in the room here and there, and the occasional whiff of rotten meat or sewage. He thinks maybe he's got a hole in one of his pipes or something, so he calls a plumber, but the plumber says everything looks fine. Over the next couple of months, items in the house continue to disappear and show up again in weird places, and the cold spots get more frequent. And just to let you know, this is summertime, hot and humid, and they don't have air conditioning. They hear strange sounds in the house, and that awful smell keeps wafting through the house. Nick starts to think maybe some animal got into the attic and died. That would account for both the sounds and the smell. So he goes up into the attic and looks, but he doesn't find anything. He calls an exterminator to go check out the attic, and even he says everything looks good. While all of this is going on, both Nick and his wife, who we'll call Helen, are having trouble sleeping. They're both having nightmares and even waking up with scratches on them. All of this activity is slowly ramping up over time, but Nick and his wife do not put two and two together until the night that something slaps Nick in the face. Helen turns on the light to see the perfect outline of a hand in red on Nick's cheek. And that's when they realize there might be something bigger than broken pipes going on here. All the pieces sort of fall into place in their heads. They start to sleep with the lights on, but that doesn't help. Things just continue to get worse until the night Nick wakes up to Helen crying out in pain. On her shoulder is a bite mark. Helen says, I can't stay here, and leaves to go stay in a hotel for the night. The next week is pretty quiet. Maybe it's gone, but it's not. A few nights later, Nick wakes up to Helen screaming, but realizes that he can't move, like hands are holding him down. He can't do anything except lay on his side, looking at his wife, who also doesn't seem to be able to move, as some unseen force pulls her hair and slaps her face. Helen starts praying to St. Michael, and the attack stops, and they can move again. And this time, they both get up and go to a hotel. And Helen never steps foot in that house again. So Nick is at the end of his rope, and he's hanging out with a friend one day and just starts telling the friend everything. The friend's wife overhears the conversation and tells Nick that she knows a friend of a friend who's a medium. Nick has no idea what that means, but who cares? If it helps, he's all in. He meets the man at a coffee shop, and even before Nick can tell him what is going on, the man says, "You've got something very dark following you around." He says he thinks it used to be human, but isn't anymore, and that whatever it is probably attached itself to him and followed him to his house. He then tells Nick, "Go get yourself blessed and get a St. Michael's pendant. Never take it off. And as far as the house goes, you need to get a priest and a shaman. That's the only way to get rid of it. The house is not built on burial ground, but it used to be Anishinaabe tribal land, thus the need for the shaman as well." Now, Nick isn't particularly religious, but Helen is Catholic. So Helen talks to her priest at church, and Nick talks to a Native American inmate at the prison about finding a shaman. The priest and the shaman do their blessings and rituals. By all accounts, it works. However, Helen still leaves him. She just can't take the stress of not knowing if Nick might bring something else home someday. Now, everyone at work knew Nick had gotten a divorce. Unfortunately, that's pretty common, but none of them would ever have guessed that Nick's divorce was caused by a demon. I wonder how you explain that to the judge. But then again, this is not the first marriage to be trashed by unseen spirits. But do not despair. The forces of good are still out there. And this Dogman story will prove it. This encounter comes from someone who wishes to remain anonymous because so far, the reaction he's received from the few family and friends he has confided in has not been stellar. So we're just going to call him Jim. It's early spring of 1977 in Comstock, Michigan, and Jim's only about 10 years old. Jim's cousin Mike is a hunter and a trapper, and on this particular day, Jim and another cousin, Steve, they're going to go with Mike into the woods just down the street from Uncle Raymond's house to collect the last of Mike's traps. They all walk into the woods, only 150 to 200 yards, when they run into these two guys that have started a marijuana patch. Must have been a pretty good patch because these guys are not messing around. One of them grabs Mike from behind, puts a knife to his throat, while the other guys start harassing Jim and Steve. But the chaos stops on a dime when they all notice they're being watched by a dog standing on a dirt mound. But this is no ordinary dog. This dog is about 7 feet tall, with a pretty beefy build covered in bluish black and silver fur. And most memorably for Jim, giving off this intense smell of musk and decay. They are all looking at the dried blood covering its face, chest, and both arms to about its elbows. But it is looking at the bullies. Its eyes are a golden color with an intense focus on the two bullies. As it stares them down, it lets out this primeval, guttural growl as saliva starts dripping from its mouth. The two bullies freak out, push Jim, Mike, and Steve to the ground, and take off running. Mike and Steve get up and start running for home, but Jim is petrified and just stands there, frozen in fear. The Dogman looks right at him, but with a very different, softer look in its eyes. Jim can feel his panic draining away and a sense of calm taking its place. He is completely in awe. The Dogman turns from Jim and takes off in the same direction that the two bullies did, popping Jim out of his awe bubble, and he also starts running for home. 47 years later, Jim and his cousins have still never talked about what happened, but Jim can still see it in his mind as if it happened yesterday. He can still smell that acrid smell. And to this day, every time he gets a whiff of something dead, he relives his encounter with the Dogman all over again. I can't even imagine how I would react to seeing something so out of my reality, something so unfamiliar. But then again, as this next story will prove, terrifying encounters can just as easily come from things that are very familiar. This encounter comes from InBetweener, Wise Woman Healing, otherwise known as Melissa. When Melissa was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, her dad was in the Navy, meaning he was gone a lot, making her mom basically a single parent left to deal with the ups and downs of raising a child on her own. And like lots of young kids, Melissa sometimes has nightmares. No big deal. Mom always comes in and makes things better. This one night, shortly after her dad had come home, Melissa has a really bad dream and wakes up as usual. But this time, as Melissa sits up and opens her eyes, she sees her mom standing by the wall next to her dresser. Well, that's weird. And she thinks, why is Mom just standing there and not coming over to my bed or saying anything? Melissa can see her, plain as day, wearing her normal fuzzy blue robe that makes her look like Cookie Monster, her usual pink hair rollers in her hair, and her glasses. But Melissa can feel that something isn't right. This is not her mother. So she starts screaming at the top of her lungs. Her mom and dad come running into her room, and her mom tries to calm her down, but Melissa keeps screaming. It's right there. It's right there. As she points to the side of the dresser where by now the not mom is crouching down with a look of terror on her face as well. Good. Her mom looks at the dresser and says, honey, there's nothing there. By now, Dad, who's brand new to this whole kids having nightmares thing, is standing there wondering what in the hell is going on. So he starts screaming too, because it just seems to be like the right thing to do. Eventually, doppelganger mom fades away and Melissa calms down. And this may all have happened about 51 years ago, but Melissa remembers it as if it happened just yesterday. Being a mom is tough. We're all just trying to figure it out as we go along. Thankfully, by the time your kids get old enough to figure out your secret, your parenting job is done. But as a mom, what do you do when your young child makes you keenly aware that he knows more than you do? Every parent thinks their kids are special, and they are. But there are some children that are more special than others. And whether that's a physical handicap or an IQ off the charts, these children often pose unique parenting challenges. Hope and her husband Will live in Mississippi with their 4 kids. But their oldest child, who we're going to call Tommy, has proven to be one of those extra special children. Now, life is pretty normal until Tommy is about 3 years old. Hope and her husband had a set of twins about 6 months earlier that understandably take up a lot of their time. So when they take a vacation to the beach with grandma and grandpa, and on their first night there, have the chance to leave the twins with them and take Tommy to the beach to spend some quality time with just him, they jump at it. The 3 of them get to the beach and have a great time playing in the sand, playing in the water. Tommy is having a heyday. But the very next morning, Tommy doesn't want to go back. He's convinced that there are alligators in the water. Well, everybody brushes it off as the tantrums of a 3-year-old and go back to the beach anyway. But when they get there, Tommy won't go anywhere near the water. Dad and Grandpa take the twins into the water, and no sooner do they even hit the water line when Tommy freaks out. But the twins are loving it. And as they're all having fun in the waves, a man comes running down the beach, yelling at Dad and Grandpa to get out of the water. Turns out this guy's been fishing on the pier, and from above can see this alligator swimming back and forth like it's stalking them. Animal control comes out and removes the alligator. But how did Tommy know the night before that it was going to be there the next day? He's 3. A while later, Hope is getting ready to go outside and work on her flower beds. Before she goes out, Tommy comes to her and says she can't go out to see her flowers because a snake is going to bite her. So Hope says, "Don't worry, honey. I'm not going to get bitten by a snake, but I promise I'll be extra careful." She goes out to her flower beds and starts pulling weeds and is a little surprised to find a rattlesnake under her hydrangeas. She backs away and goes back into the house, where Tommy is all too happy to tell her that she was wrong. A few months after that hair-raising experience, Hope and her husband decide to surprise Tommy with a trip to Grandma and Grandpa's. They don't say anything to him that would spoil the surprise, and Tommy's even sleeping when they put him in the car. About 10 minutes into the trip, Tommy wakes up and tells them, "You can't go this way to Grandma's house. The bridge is broken." So they tell Tommy, "I'm sure the bridge is fine. But how did you know we were going to Grandma's?" Tommy says, "I had a dream." As they approach the bridge, Tommy's dad slows the car, and he and Hope can see that on the far end of the bridge, it looks like it's crumbling. Hope's cousin happens to be the county supervisor, so she gets on the phone to let him know there's a problem. And within 20 minutes, the whole thing is shut down and detour signs are posted. In 2018, Hope and her husband have been trying for a while to have another baby. Tommy, who's around 5 at this point, wakes up and tells Hope that he's sad he's never going to see his baby sister. Hope doesn't even find out she's pregnant for another week, but their joy turns to heartbreak when Hope has a miscarriage. And while she can't say for sure that the child was a girl, Tommy's words stay with her. And Tommy, who's now 11, still says he wishes his baby sister were here. And while Hope says Tommy doesn't really call out specifics anymore, he still has a rock-solid intuition. One day, he brings one of his little brothers to her and says, "You better check him. Something's about to happen." And he walks away. Less than 5 minutes later, the little brother has a seizure. And while this special ability that Tommy has doesn't really have much of a bearing on their day-to-day life, it is hard for Hope to argue when Tommy says he's right. Man, it never ceases to amaze me how many crazy things are happening out there just to those of you who watch this channel. If you want to stay submerged in this potpourri of craziness, watch this video right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.